So I wanted to check out Adam and Sitch going back and forth, Sitch and Adam, over the topic of Trump running for president, and specifically his anti-democratic tendencies with the elector plot, and whether that disqualifies him from being president of the United States. And Sitch and Adam had a back and forth about this, and I watched this the first time, and it was kind of hard for me to believe that Adam had actually said that, because I had known that Adam from previous clips that I had seen was not a Trump supporter, does not support Trump. And when I heard this felt like so like it disregarded the checks and balances of a properly functioning republic so blatantly that I must have misinterpreted what he said. So I decided, you know what, I'll go through it again on stream to make sure that I'm not misinterpreting, because I do not want to be a disingenuous Devin, you know? And so I don't want to fall into Pisco's clip chimping. So we're going to watch the 6 minutes and 11 seconds of this clip, of this back and forth between Sitch and Adam over the topic of Donald Trump's electors plot, and whether his attempt to overturn the election system makes it so he doesn't deserve anyone's vote, and whether or not that should disqualify him from the office.
It's like a policy decision. I'm going to look at the policies. I'm going to, you know, figure out what policies I like best.
Mm-hmm.
What about you?
Going to? Well, I'm still not going to vote, so it doesn't matter. As I said,
You're not going to vote. Well, you said you would. I noticed last time you said you would say if it was you would vote Trump, who you would vote for, Trump or over Biden, or Biden over Trump, but you never said. It was funny.
Well, I said, so my position, my problem with Trump has nothing to do with policy. My problem with Trump is that I will never vote for him because he literally tried to get.
By the way, there is like policy differences with Trump. Hey, Trump wants to get rid of the deficit, but then he made the largest deficit in American history, and all of the stuff he said was going to happen, like all the increased economic activity that was going to make up for the deficit spending and the deficit tax cuts that he was making, didn't materialize, and it led to a gigantic deficit, which Biden, even with his massive spending plans in order to get us out of the COVID recession, was able to reduce, and he reduced. And so if you're somebody who's like, from a policy perspective, as somebody who votes conservative because you're scared, you're tired of the out of control deficit spending, like policy wise, is Trump the best option? You can go policy by policy by policy as well. It's just that Trump, on top of, I think, having a lot of bad policies, at least from my perspective, is someone who also doesn't care about the institutions and the system, which allows us to keep transferring the keys of power to policymakers and to decision makers down the line of succession through our republic. And if you get rid of those checks and balances, you can, I mean, while it's difficult to derail a democracy, it is not impossible, and we should not play games with somebody who's shown the ability to try to overturn the electoral system when he does not get the way he wants, and then cause for the suspension of the U.S. Constitution. While Donald Trump could win again and then not overturn and destroy American democracy, maybe damage it a little bit, the institutions, who knows, giving him the opportunity and giving him more opportunities after he's already been in the office and he's learned the ropes, and then he continued to claim authoritarian rhetoric, does not seem like a smart move for somebody who cares about Republican style democracy.
The vice president to just throw out 80 million people's votes and declare himself president.
Right. I
can never vote for someone unless the person he's running against is like a pedophile space alien that eats people, or something to that effect. I can never vote for Trump because of that. That's such I'm a very big guy about procedure and maintaining the system and the legality of that system and doing things the right way. And that's such a Donald Trump taking a big steaming pile of shit on the American democracy, the American constitutional republic, in such a way that I find just so vehemently offensive that I could never vote for him after that.
Well, but you are talking about a character issue.
Yeah.
You're not really.
That's what I'm saying. It has nothing to do with policy. Yeah, it's a complete character.
Well, it has to do with, character, in his values, right? If somebody doesn't value the things that I think a president should value, then you could say it's not a policy difference, but his values and how he views our institutions are going to impact his policy and how he tries to go about implementing his policies. which matters.
Issue.
Because if he doesn't value democracy, like clean, easy access to the ballot is not going to be something he cares about, which is something that I care about, which helps set policy.
This is the thing. This is the argument that most people make. And this is the argument that really bugs the fuck out of me. Like they're basically saying, okay, Donald Trump is a traitor and you can't vote for a traitor. And that's the kind of psychological manipulation that makes me think, what the fuck? Maybe I can vote for a traitor, you fucker.
Well, I never said you can't vote. You can do whatever you want. I'm just saying I'm never going to vote for someone who's done that action. I find it personally reprehensible. And
right.
traitorous. Yeah.
Well, I mean, but you're making a decision completely differently from me.
Yes.
I'm making a decision based on what I think the outcome is going to be. And you're making a decision based on like rewarding someone or not rewarding someone for some kind of personality trait.
Obviously,
like
respect for democracy is, I think, a little bit more than a personality trait. If someone says, I didn't win, burn the Constitution, get rid of it, suspend it, suspend the Constitution and make me president because I didn't win. And then you see him try to do everything within their power to make that reality happen, but then take credit for transferring the power when they try to throw every roadblock in front of it. Like, this is not somebody who cares about, you know, the peaceful transfer of power or Republican style democracy and that every vote counts and every vote matters. If he cared about every vote mattering, then he wouldn't only call Georgia and ask them to recount the votes and give them the exact amount of votes he needs to win. He would do that in the states that he was also winning, because it wouldn't just be about counting the votes that potentially could swing it in his favor, but also the votes that could potentially swing it back in Kamala's favor. I don't think he has any respect for the peaceful transfer of power. I don't think he has any respect for the Republican style democracy. And so if I'm thinking about who should be in charge of a republic, it should be somebody who respects how a republic works and will not jerry-rig it and will not do their best to bend it so they can go around it and violate the rules and constraints that we put on the most powerful people in the world, the most powerful people in the country, but also who are the most powerful people in the world.
This personality, the trait that you're talking about, could actually be good for America, like I said.
Like,
yeah.
If I...
It could be good for America that he would disregard if he lost an election or not. And it's not a good personality trait. It's a bad personality trait. That would mean that if we thought he was doing a bad job, he would Nicolas Maduro it up if he given the opportunity. If that is his personality trait, how is that a good thing? Well, I guess he's holding on to his policy commitments. If I want to do this, so I will stay in power until I get it done. But if it's not working, you need an eject switch. That's what's great about democracy. They don't have that in a lot of countries. There's no eject switch in places like Egypt with al-Sisi. There's no eject switch in places like Saudi Arabia. There's no eject switch in places like Belarus. Him saying that he's willing to ignore the eject switch even when the American people pull it is enough of a disqualifying trait in a republic where that eject switch is what makes the system work, that you just cannot trust him with it.
I had a crystal ball and I could see the future. Okay. And I can see that in the future that Trump being president is going to have substantially better outcomes for America than Kamala or anyone or Gretchen or Newsom or something, right? Then I'd say, okay, then I would support Trump, right? But we don't know what the future will be. So we just have to base it on what information we do know. And the information I do know is Donald Trump, I think, is an immoral person who's done many actions to that effect and doesn't seem to really give a shit about, I don't think, in my opinion, really gives a shit about America really at all. And is really only interested in cementing his own status.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, but I think that's like all candidates, especially at the presidential level.
Not all candidates do the fake electors plot. Not all candidates write up executive orders about seizing voting machines. Not all candidates are going to watch their riders riot and storm the Capitol building and use the opportunity to call legislators to try to pressure them to overturn the election. using the violence to try to overturn the democracy, which is why people call it an insurrection, which is why people point to it as an attempted coup, is because that while it wasn't coordinated with each individual protester, he was trying to utilize that violence in order to overturn the system.
So
I don't think most, there's a lot, like all politicians and all presidents have to have a massive ego to run for office. But I think most of them have some level of respect for the American system.
I mean, even if you agreed that all politicians would do that in that situation, which I don't agree, Mike Pence is a good example of that. He didn't, right? Like, some would just not be so ballsy as to have even tried, even if they wanted to. Trump is not only willing to do something that he shouldn't, which is try to overturn a democratic election to keep himself in power, but he's also ballsy enough to actually give it a run. And if he's ballsy enough to give it a run the first time, why wouldn't he be ballsy enough to give it a run in a different way another time if America chose an eject switch after a second Trump presidency and he wanted Don Jr. to follow him or somebody else to follow him, or he didn't particularly like the results of the midterms, which he needed in order to get legislative achievements done?
Any other president would ever even have attempted to try to do the fake elector scheme, which is why no one ever even tried to do it or even thought to do that until Donald Trump.
yeah, no.
So
yeah. I mean, even that you could think of, you could spin that into a positive relatively easily. Like, okay, this guy's going to fight like hell to get whatever policies he's putting forward to get done. Right?
Yeah, my God. Look, when you look at Stalin's purges, when you think of it from my perspective, I mean, he is grabbing on to the Soviet Union with both hands. I mean, he is aggressively pursuing his goals. Honestly, you could call Mr. Joseph a go-getter. In fact, you can spin that into a positive. You could spin his disregard for American democracy into a positive, because it's an example of how much he wants to achieve his goals. My goodness. Well, yeah, if you agree that playing by any and all rules does not matter, and anything that matters is the pursuit of power and whatever Trump wants, I mean, like, yeah, it's a positive if that's your only priority. But I also would like to one day have children and then have those children inherit a republic. And so if I care about that and not just immediately if a wall gets built on the southern border or some short-term policy achievement, then yeah, I'm going to care a little bit about process, even though it's boring.
You're like, holy shit, this guy wants it so fucking bad.
I mean, you could make that argument. I would say that it's not about policy with him. It was about the desperation. We've talked about this, the desperation to be a two-term president, because to be a two-term president is like ultimate status. To be a one-term president is kind of like loser.
Totally.
And so It's not really like, oh, I have some amazing like, you know, it's not like the FDR situation where you're like, well, FDR did a lot of fucking shady, weird shit, like for his policies that he won in the past. It's not even like that situation. It's like, oh, no, this was really just to cement his own status as a two-term president.
Yeah, but it's aligned with a lot of people's policy goals. And that's why, I mean, this is literally why
the policy goals
works.
are second, right?
Well, I mean, obviously Trump is going to worry about his legacy, and his legacy is going to be tied up into whatever policy goals he achieves.
Maybe, but I don't like if Trump is not a person who has a lot of.
I mean, like, even if we just say policy goals, right? And we could talk about Trump's policies, reducing the deficit, he achieved the opposite of that. Long-term solutions on the border, I mean, he was actively undermining the Senator Langford like immigration deal. Like, you could maybe talk about the Abraham Accords, but that was a continuation of like previous momentum that was already going. Like, you can go like policy by policy, but the process matters, because the precedent that a president sets like can affect things down the line. Like, for example, let's say Donald Trump got his policies done, but then he did it by getting rid of the filibuster. And then after getting rid of the filibuster, Democrats pass what would have been gun control reform that wouldn't have been popular in many parts of the country, and they wouldn't have been able to do before because they only had 52 senators in favor. But because the filibuster is now gone, they're able to pass that. And that norm of getting rid of the filibuster was set because Donald Trump wanted to pass legislation that Democrats had no interest in passing after breaking down the filibuster. Now it is not just that Donald Trump's legacy is, you know, he passed that legislation. It is now that that legislation could be easily undone by 52 votes. And now the Democrats are going to push through things through the filibuster. The precedent setting, it would be precedent setting. Point is, like, process does matter, even if the process is boring. For like, if Joe Biden said there's not going to be an election tomorrow, Kamala Harris is going to be president, you can all bite me. Come fight Scranton Joe. I'll send you into an early grave. I'm 81 years old. The same worms that eat you are going to eat me anyway. And he does that. And Kamala Harris, and it all works, and Kamala Harris ends up being the next president. We got Kamala Harris as president. Now, if we instead waited for the actual election to happen and then Kamala won fair and square and she was made president, it's the same outcome, which is Kamala Harris is president. But the process and the precedent that process sets matters. And so even if Kamala Harris wouldn't become a dictator after being made president by Joe Biden, being able to say that that's possible could make it so somebody else hands over the presidency to their children. Some American Assad, for example. Maybe Dick Cheney goes for the presidency. I don't know. You get the idea. The process matters, and I don't think Adam has enough respect for the process.
He's not a person who's motivated by ideology. So he's not like, oh, you know.
That's a plus.
Well, is it? Because then it's his ideology is just whoever he's surrounded himself with, whatever they represent.
Look, if the
Can I
voters...
also say that, like, a common complaint about Trump is that Trump doesn't have beliefs about a lot of these things or doesn't know these issues very well. And so that combined with Trump just being a very impressionable person means that the last person to talk to him about an issue is often how, like, what policy position the administration takes.
Look, if the voters want something,
mm-hmm.
and you know, obviously they're electing a candidate to achieve whatever policy goal this is that they want. I mean, if Trump is going to fight 10 times harder for that policy goal, obviously, than Joe Biden. Like, Joe Biden was a wet fish on policy goals.
I don't even know what that means, that Joe Biden was a wet fish on policy goals. Like, Donald Trump, for example, said he wanted to do an infrastructure bill. It was going to get one passed. He did it. Joe Biden did, and he got it with bipartisan support. He also did the CHIPS Act. There's some promises he hasn't been able to deliver on, like the minimum wage stuff. He tried to, but failed. But I mean, that's also true of Donald Trump, who said he was going to overturn Obamacare and replace it with something better. And not only did he not overturn Obamacare, John McCain was one of the decisive votes in stopping that, but he never even offered an alternative, which helped undermine him replacing it, which is part of the reason why John McCain voted against it. Like, what does he mean wet fish on policy achievements? Relative to what? Relative to Donald Trump? I don't think that's fair. Relative to Lyndon B. Johnson, maybe, when you're talking like the master of the Senate, I don't know, but Donald J. Trump? No. No. Yeah, I think Adam is just way off base here. Is Adam a Canadian? I won't hold it against him. He's fighting at a disadvantage. But let me also say that I have talked to them about going on the show recently, and it just didn't pan out due to electricity outages and just me being deployed to the front back and forth, and it hasn't worked. I'd still be willing to go on and talk about any differences or, you know, agreements we might have on things for the things we do agree upon in the future. I just haven't been able to do it recently.